There are many problems facing us as a society today, and it seems like there's more problems presenting themselves almost on a daily basis. However, one of the biggest, most prominent, and most long-lived problems is racial inequality. Now, it doesn't manifest itself today the same way it did in the days of slavery, Irish immigration, Jim Crow laws, the Chinese immigrants or Japanese internment, or even the Civil Rights Movement. But it is still a problem with all society, and it prevents or provides major roadblocks for the progress of society. Now, it seems as if going into the new millennium, we were kind of at an all-time low with racism here in America, at least. And however, it kind of seems to turn around, and it's been getting worse and worse over the past couple of decades. Now, racial equality has definitely degraded, and it's been sparking hatred and inequality on both sides. I say both sides, any side, whether you're the perceived majority or minority alike, and it's just it's something that we need to collectively come together as a society and just end. Now, as much as I normally refrain from using any kind of a Hollywood figure to help me drive home any point of substance, Morgan Freeman actually makes a very logical, straightforward, and clear point. And this was during a 60 Minutes interview with Mike Wallace. And Mike Wallace asked him about Black History Month and his thoughts on it. And he sums it up in one word: ridiculous. Now, his thoughts on it were, he goes on to explain that there's no White History Month, no Jewish History Month, and that the entire idea is kind of asinine. And then as they go on with their conversation, Mike Wallace asks him what we should do about racism. How are we going to solve the problem? And he says, this is a direct quote, "Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man, and I'm going to ask that you stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace, and you know me as Morgan Freeman." And I think he has a great point with that, the great thought behind it, and I wholeheartedly agree with the ideology there. Now, in my opinion, the first and probably only step we need to take to really end this whole problem once and for all is to simply stop treating each other as part of their ethnicities and just treat every person as a person. Simply put, by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Now, one of the hardest obstacles in achieving this equality to overcome is affirmative action. Now, affirmative action sounds nice if you don't really know the ins and outs of it, because it appears to be beneficial for the minority it is trying to help. However, it's very detrimental to them. So, we actually have Elizabeth Slattery wrote an article on this for the Heritage Foundation, and in this she illustrates this same phenomenon as it applies to universities. Now, in her article, she writes about how when you start accepting underqualified individuals just based on their race, and then telling other individuals that they can't, there's no room for admittance because, once again, just because of their race. Now we have all those individuals that got accepted that did not meet the qualifications. Not only do a lot of them just drop out, but the problem is now you have the demographic that they were trying to support. Now all their GPAs are lower, their success rate for their programs are lower, and their graduations in general are lower. So for example, when the University of California implemented race-blind admissions, within the very next year, they went from a 16 to 18% academic jeopardy for Native and Black Americans, all the way down to a 6%. That's less than half. Now, I use the universities as an example, but this same phenomenon applies to the corporate world, it applies to military, and it applies to politics. Now, another problem, which is a relatively new construct, is the redefinition a fallacious redefinition of the word racism itself. Now, this new definition, or these new definitions, has the pre-qualifier of the party that is racist has to be an institutional power. Now, the reason for this is so they could designate white people as the only people that can be racist and never the victim, which is 100% fallacious, especially because if I were to go to Harlem right now, I would not be the one in institutional power. And likewise, all it does is provide a double standard, which is not the point. We need true equality. Now, when I was growing up, racism was a very simply defined word. It is racial prejudice against another. Any form of hatred or thought that one ethnic group is inferior to another, that is as simple as it gets, is racism. Now, anyone is capable of racism, and we cannot move forward as a society, at least in this regard, until we recognize that. Every single person is capable of being racist or participating in racism. And we also need to recognize that there is no acceptable outlet for that. There's no time where you can be racist without having a negative consequence, both for your own race or whatever race you might be racist against. Now, a perfect example of a person that embodies racism is a man by the name of King Samir Shabazz, who happens to be the leader of the Black Panthers. Now, this is not the same Black Panthers that it was in the 60s. It is not a civil rights group. Honestly, it's designated as a terrorist group, and rightfully so. Now, this individual actually, clearly, and publicly incites members to actually, and quote, bomb white churches and kill white babies, end quote. This is not a joke, it's not hyperbole or a metaphor. He is actually telling his members to bomb white churches and kill white babies. This is the kind of thing that is just unacceptable in society. And the worst part is that he got no backlash. And the only reason he got no backlash was because he was black. If he would have been white and said that about black babies or Latino or Asian, no way in hell he would have gotten away with it. But this is the reality of 2019. Now, we also have another individual from Cambridge. His name is Jason. I don't know how to pronounce his name, so forgive me. Osamad Akundeye. He tweeted that all white people are racist. White middle class, white working class, white men, white women, white gays, white children, they can all get it. Now, that last part seemingly implying violent action needs to be taken against white people. Now, this came among several other tweets that were inciting race-fueled protests, which actually took place. And among those tweets was he told all the protesters to smash everything. Now, these two people might seem like a very small percentage of the population. However, there are many, many, many like-minded people who just don't have enough of a platform because there's no media coverage on them. Now, the reality of it is that these individuals are not progressing their own race, nor are they progressing the rest of society. All they're doing is segregating themselves and providing racial prejudice against their own race as well as against white people or any other race. So, very simply put, racism begets racism. It is a self-perpetuating problem. Most people will, without a second's hesitation, agree that racism is a major issue in today's society. But I firmly believe that if your idea of solving this problem includes any kind of double standard, and you treat one person differently from another just based on their race, you're part of the problem. Now, the whole issue with that is a lot of people think that yes, we should give different opportunities to different races based on the idea of equity. However, that is just simply not the solution. What we need is true equality. Everybody needs the same opportunity, whether they're regardless of race, sex, or even religion. And we should only judge each other based on what we do with those opportunities. So, I believe that there should be no double standards whatsoever in those regards, and that the only humane way, the only viable way of solving this problem is the simplest one, yet seems to be the most overlooked in today's day and age, and it's treat every person as just that, as a person. And Epstein didn't kill himself.